Good evening. I think we'll call the meeting to order. This is the fourth public meeting of the Louisville Comprehensive Review Committee. Is that still okay? As I was saying, this is the fourth meeting of the commission to take comments from residents of Jefferson County on their views on the successes, the failures, the inadequacies, anything that is concerning citizens regarding the state and the success or improvements that might be needed to the current merged government. My name is Earl Jones. I'm co-chair. I'm an attorney here in Louisville. I'm going to pass the mic to my co-chair, Jason Nemes, and then to the rest of the commissioners to introduce themselves.
Thank you. This is I'm Jason Nemes. I represent this district, this area. I also want to note, just quickly, the other representatives and council persons who are here that are not on this at this table. Representative Kevin Bratcher's here, Susan Witten, John Hodgson, and then Councilman Winkler, Reed, and Piagentini. And then I also want to thank Mayor. Is he on the table? I don't know. I didn't see him. I saw him come in. I didn't see him. He's on the commission. I also want to thank the mayor of Middletown for having us here. And this is his town, and so we appreciate your hospitality. We'll go down from the far right to the far left, and then we'll begin.
Good evening. I'm Bonnie Jung, a mayor of the beautiful city of Douglas Hills. You want to know where that is? It's straight down the road across from Blankenbaker. I represent the Jefferson County League of Cities. I'm past president, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of the mayors and elected officials that are here tonight from our 80 cities. Thank you for being here.
I'm Sean Driesbach. I'm the fire chief of Jeffersontown Fire Department. I'm representing the actual fire chiefs of Jefferson County.
Hi, I'm Julie Rocky Adams. I am state senator for District 36, which is where we are tonight. So glad to be here, and I am on the commission.
I'm Mike Nemes, state senator from Bullitt County and some of southern Jefferson County.
And I'm Ken Fleming. I represent the 48th District, which includes part of Jefferson and Oldham County, and it stretches from roughly down Indian Hills all the way up to the county line and goes into Oldham County, up to Crestwood and so forth. So,
hi, I'm Shelby Somerville. I do government affairs for Greater Louisville, Inc., which is the regional chamber of commerce here.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Butler, and I'm Mayor Greenberg's designee.
Hi, Anthony Piagentini. I represent District 19. Welcome to Metro Council District 19. And I'm one of the Metro Council representatives on the commission. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Cindy Fowler, District 14, and I am appointed by the President of the Council. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to begin by going through the list of those who've signed up to speak. I believe the first name on the list is Jerry Tate. Is that correct? What does that say?
Danny Taffel.
Danny Taffel. So much of that. Right. Now we've got, you want to please come up to the mic. This session is being recorded, and the only way that it can be successfully recorded is if we're all speaking in the mic. By the way, Mr. Taffel, you've got 3 minutes. All speakers have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep it quick. I'm the mayor for the city of Rolling Fields. My big concerns are safety, representation, and zoning power. Rolling Fields, years ago, and many other home rule cities, contracted for enhanced police presence, which was a case where JCPD enhanced, we had, excuse me, sorry, I'll get a little closer. Rolling Fields and many other home rule cities contract out for enhanced police protection. And it used to be the case where the Jefferson County Police Department provided support. And I feel like at this point, LMPD has all but abdicated to our contracted police force, and we no longer have any kind of representation or support from LMPD. And then I'll talk more about representation. The MSD board, which is now preparing a historical increase, is appointed solely by the mayor. Not a single Republican is on the board right now. And in a last election where we had a breakdown of 51% Democrat and 46% Republican. And then lastly is a zoning power. I feel like the metro government has chipped away at Home Rule City Zoning Authority. I don't know who appoints BOZA or the metro planning, but Home Rule City's voice is all but eliminated in zoning powers. And that recently has taken place with the accessory dwelling units, which Metro passed recently, which all but eliminates our ability to have any kind of zoning because of the size of our city. So that's all for me. And those are my concerns.
Casey Frazier and Lucas Frazier, you're on deck.
I'm short, so this should work out really well. Yes, I'm Casey Frazier. I'm a Floyd's Fork DRO resident, and I live in the floodplain of Floyd's Fork in the Eastwood area. I'm here to talk about two things, although we could probably talk about 10. So I will pick two. First is the system development charge. This was a charge that was created approximately 20 years ago in order to, and it's only assessed in East End and Southeast End areas of Jefferson County, knowing that the development that was going to occur in this area was going to be put on small country roads that needed improvements. So each lot is given a $1,000 assessment, and the developer has to pay that. In the past 25 years, just Eastwood alone has seen a 500% increase in rooftops. 500% increase in rooftops. For 20 years, we should have been receiving $1,000 per lot for that, which approximately would be about $3 million that should go towards Eastwood in road improvements. We have not seen $3 million worth of road improvements, and we've been told that those fees go to pay bonds on roads that have already been improved. Who knows where in the city? We don't even know where the money goes. We are looking at another 100% increase in our area right now, which would bring us approximately another $3 to $4 million as these houses are being built. Do you think Eastwood is going to see $3 to $4 million in road improvements? I have my doubts. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the process that has occurred with the Floyd's Fork Development Review Overlay, which we have some champions here, Councilman Winkler, Piangentini, Armstrong. We had a Metro Council pass an ordinance, unanimously supported, gave our planning department from Louisville Metro the assignment to review the Floyd's Fork DRO, which is a special district, if you don't know, that is supposed to protect Floyd's Fork from becoming urban drainage. They were given, it was passed in June of last year, they were given a December deadline. Nothing occurred from Louisville Metro until 11 and a half months after the passing of the ordinance. In May of this year, Planning Department, overseen by a director appointed by the mayor, had their first official public meeting where they handed out a 3-page questionnaire that was full of confusing and, may I say, loaded questions, gave us 2 weeks to respond, spent 2 weeks to observe it, and then outlaid a huge overhaul of the Floyd's Fork Development Review Overlay. My complaint is this is being run by someone who's appointed by the mayor. The department is totally removed from what it's like to live in the Floyd's Fork DRO, or outside the Gene Snyder for that matter, and is overhauling something that should be a special district and is being done by people who are totally removed and not listening to the concerns of the citizens in this area. Seems like there's a breakdown in the city-county merger.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier, you're up. Bob Federico, you're on deck.
Thank you very much. Hopefully this is good. So 10 years before the merger, 1993, they did set up the DRO. The DRO was designed, as my wife had said, to protect Floyd's Fork. East of Floyd's Fork, there were roughly 800 houses back then in that area. 5 country roads, from Aiken Road down to Taylorsville Road, less than 800. Then you fast forward to today, we have over 4,000. As she was saying, that's huge growth. The same 5 country roads. We've had no changes in our roadways. We are having studies done by traffic now that 6 years from now, we are going to be at zero capacity. The traffic industry is saying, wait, what's going on there? Zero capacity. That means that there's so much traffic, we will not be able to get out of our road to get onto Chevrolet Road because it is so built out. And yet, we are still building more and approving more. There's over 1,000 more dwelling units proposed for the DRO alone. It is coming, and it's still coming, and it keeps on flooding us. We are getting overwhelmed. Last year, I went to 9, I'd never been to a single neighborhood meeting in my life. I went to 9 last year just to start getting involved. I joined the Complete Streets Coalition because I saw a need that we need to have volunteers, we need people in the community to get involved, so I started joining different things. Wherever I could, I'd speak up, I'd write to different Metro Council members, write emails, got to know several of them, amazing people. And yet, when I talked to people downtown, the planning design services, we asked about a specific development. It was 866 houses right along the water, 500 in the DRO. And we said, wait a minute, that's intense, incredibly intense development. And yet they said, it's perfect. We actually need more. We actually think it should be easier to develop in the water, like right along the water's edge. They want to fill the floodplain. Planning design is hoping that this change in the DRO will make it easier to develop right on the water's edge because they want to build to the edges. They told us that like right to our face. This is something that it really woke us up to realize there's a disconnect with the people downtown and the people outside the Gene Center that live in the waterway, right on the edge. We see the beauty and we see it eroding away. And it's very nerve-wracking to watch it happen every single storm. Every storm I go outside to see how much of my yard is washed away. 10 feet went away in the last 2 years. This intense. We really need a change. We need some help for outside the Gene Snyder. Thank you very much.
Bob Federico, you're up. Kathy Stitch. And if you would, if I call your name and say you're on deck, come on down so we don't waste more time than we need to. Mr. Federico, you're up.
This is Bob Federico. I'm the chairman of the Eastwood Village Council. Very quickly, the Eastwood Village Council is an advocacy group for the area. So I'm kind of representing the folks that we deal with on a regular basis. I think you've already heard a couple of these things, so I'll just touch on them very quickly. Systems development fee, you've heard it discussed. Sure, system development fee, I think you've heard that discussed. What we're really looking and trying to understand is how we know how it's collected. We have no idea where it goes, what it's used for. We'd like to see some documentation. It should be somewhere that I can go at any point in time and see what's collected in the area and how that money is appropriated, hopefully back to the area it was generated from. The other one is the local government premium tax. For those of you who don't know, every insurance policy that you have, there's 5% bottom line. That gets collected on your insurance policies, your home, your car, your auto, your RV, your boat, your life. That 5% currently goes to Louisville Metro. What we'd like to do is find out how much of that is collected at the end of the day in the east and southeast area, and where those funds get used. How do we find that out? How do we understand how they're dispersed and what the appropriations of those funds are? Those are significant dollars. We don't know about that. We'd like to. You've heard about police concerns. The first gentleman talked about that. I don't understand how LMPD Division 8 can manage what we need of them. They're probably understaffed, lack of resources. We need more representation on that front. Now, to get to what I'm really here for. You've already heard about infrastructure. I moved here in '89. Since then, I've seen, the Snyder is being widened. Dixie Highway's been widened. Hurstbourne Lane's been widened. I-264 has been widened. Yet I don't see any infrastructure through the east end of Louisville, and I'll use Eastwood as the point of reference. Eastwood is the hub to the wagon wheel. The wagon wheel has spokes. All those spokes are Long Run Road and eastbound and westbound Shelbyville Road, Eastwood Fisherville Road, Gilliland Lane, you name it. All that traffic flows down into a hub. The hub is Eastwood. And we have not seen anything as far as infrastructure changes to support that. As the Frasers mentioned, we're looking at 3,000 new rooftops that have already been approved, 1,000 rooftops that are in the planning. All of those are 2.1 cars added to the same road structure that we have. Add to that a Publix. We were involved in the Publix decision to get it approved here in Eastwood. We love it, we want it, But think about the traffic that's going to generate through the hub of Eastwood. Let's talk about the middle school. We have a brand new East End Middle School. It was proposed in 2018. Even though we've tried for the last 6 years, this is the intersection. I'll just mention it because everybody who lives in the area knows the Eastwood cutoff intersection in front of the Eastwood Firehouse. I bet if I asked Chief Grody how many times we've seen accidents right in front, God willing, there's a fire department there to take care of it. We've had one fatality. We've had multiple front-end collisions, head-on collisions. It's a dangerous intersection. We've not seen anything from Louisville Metro government, period, to address it. It's a safety issue.
30 seconds, Bob.
I want to remind everybody also, Louisville Metro and the Planning Commission, this is its purpose. The purpose of the Planning Commission is to direct the economic growth and physical development of Jefferson County and the communities herein, and to guide such development in such a manner as to ensure the prosperity, health, safety, and general welfare of the community. That's what we need. We need people to start looking at our road infrastructure and addressing it as much as we do anywhere else in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Kathy, Stitch, you're up in a second. Amy McConnell, you're on deck. And I would note, since you brought up Echo Trail, the new middle school, which is supposed to open 2 weeks from Wednesday, Senator Adams and Representative Hodgson's here are pushing this hard. But if it were to start today, if school were to start today, they would have porta potties. MSD does not have its work done. So if our kids go to school in 2 weeks and it doesn't change, now we're pushing MSD as hard as we can, they don't have plumbing. And I don't know how the buses are going to get there. You've been on the roads. Kathy, you're up.
Okay, I'm Kathy Stick, and I echo what's been said. I have concerns about the identity of Eastwood, the services that we have been that have been taken away from us or ignored, and the zoning and lack of oversight and the amenities. I lived in Lexington, Kentucky shortly after their merger happened, and it was handled entirely differently than what we're experiencing here. Eastwood Village was designated as such and supposed to have been protected 15 years ago, right, Bob? I can't remember how many years ago. But since then, we've lost the title of Eastwood on our fire station. We've lost our recycling center. We've lost close police protection. That's all moved away from us. We don't have the infrastructure improvements that we were promised. And before the school was open, that intersection was supposed to be repaired. It wasn't. In our neighborhood, we don't have our center street, our main street plowed. We talked to Anthony, his office, when our HOA was first turned over. We still don't have our main street plowed. I've talked with multiple people down at the in charge of that. And we were told that, number one, there's too many other places in the city that are plowed that don't need to be plowed, but they don't have time to review that map. So our center street, where we have a hill that's higher than several other areas that are being plowed right now, is not plowed, and we've got 2 bus stops on that street, and slippery, icy conditions, and it doesn't seem to matter. But because we're on the tail end of the building, it's not being reviewed. Right now, we've created a bubble with development in Eastwood and the surrounding areas. You know, the big push is to let the people who own the land get the best that they can, price-wise, for that, because the goal is to develop every project or approve every project that gets presented. But in the meantime, what that's done is created a bubble. It's not a realistic price that they're paying. So then our taxes go up, the builders come in, they develop an area, and then we're left as taxpayers trying to foot the bill for added police protection, added fire protection, a new library, the recycling center, all these things that were taken away from us, and we have to foot the bill for that. And I think one of the biggest things is we have that jewel of the Floyd's Fork and the park system there, and right now that's being threatened. The Floyd's Fork area is one of the crowning jewels in this area. It's a big draw of the parklands, and yet the area around it is just being overbuilt to the point where it's not safe anymore. There's flock cameras at the park, and
30 seconds, Kathy.
and you have to be careful about where you park and what you take with you. So I appreciate some review of what we lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, you're up. Bruce Zoller's on deck. It looks like William Gregory may be on here. I don't know if your name is stricken, if you want to come on down. What's that? Stricken. Okay, so Amy, you're up, and Bruce Zoller's on deck.
Thank you for being here today and providing this opportunity. My name is Amy McConnell, and I am a high school educator in this area. Originally from California, I moved to Colorado for graduate school and then moved to Louisville 10 years ago. I have to admit that during my first several years here, I felt overwhelmed by the overcast days. Denver has about 300 days of sun, so it was a rough transition. But one enormous blessing during that transition was the ability to drive out to the more rustic east end of Louisville with its lush green grass, trees, farms, river, and bucolic setting. I don't think it's too hyperbolic to say that for me, the Floyd's Fork area and Beckley gave me hope. For this reason, I ultimately purchased a home in the Eastwood area about 5 years ago. Sadly, within the last few years, I've noticed 3 quite disturbing changes and trends. First, as I'm sure many have noted already, tremendous development on the east end continues to erode not only the rustic landscape and natural beauty, but also the actual banks of the Floyd's Fork River that's owned by individuals and families in our community. Secondly, the aggressive development has caused excessive traffic on Shelbyville Road. I live 6 miles from my place of work. If I drive there at 5 a.m., it will take me about 9 minutes. However, if I don't leave before 7 a.m. during the week, it can take me almost 40. With another school opening in Eastwood this year, the traffic during these hours will only increase. Additionally, on a regular Saturday, when I drive possibly into Middletown for groceries, I can run into traffic that backs up for miles, literally. Now I just try to avoid Middletown altogether and shop in Shelbyville. Third, this aggressive development seems to have proceeded with little community knowledge or involvement from people who actually live in the Floyd's Fork area or East End. I just learned of this meeting yesterday, and my perspective on the new Floyd's Fork development zones was only requested through an extremely confusing emailed survey about 6 weeks ago that apparently we only had 2 weeks to complete. I work very long hours as an educator and receive close to 300 emails a day. I expect that my neighbors experience similar email overload and would have trouble responding that quickly to something that pops up in their box. A more effective means of communication and better community representation is needed. In my time in Louisville, I have greatly enjoyed working with and living among extraordinary people who care about each other, about the land, and about the community in which they live.
30 seconds, Amy.
One famous Kentucky author, Wendell Berry, once said, "Whether we and our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all our deals and decisions. And she has more votes, a longer memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we do." I pray that great consideration will be taken of the impact that any development or rezoning might have on the beautiful gift entrusted to us from those who sought in the past to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I've spoken to a lot of folks from Eastwood. As you all know, another part of House Bill 314 was the possibility of creation of new cities within various areas, and I understand that there are some areas south and also in the east that are diligently looking at a creation of new cities. So that's just another part of House Bill 314 and planning and zoning.
So, Bruce, you're up. John Hodgson, you're on deck.
I'd like to I'd like to first thank those who organized this meeting, and thanks for all of you all in attendance. Government works when people are involved. And a lot of concerns that are being addressed tonight are about the details. I'd like to address some of the bigger issues, or at least what I consider the bigger issues. We are a government of the people. Thus, we, the people, need to be involved to protect ourselves. Government needs to allow we, the people's voice to be heard. What is needed is more community involvement, where people are looking out for one another, where people are empowered to help one another and care for one another, where people are responsible for the exercise of their own free will. We need less government trying to solve the problems of the people. There is sin in the world, and there will continue to be sin in the world. Sin creates drama in the lives of the self person and of others. Sin cannot be eradicated with dollars. It cannot be eradicated with government. We need to quit trying to solve problems with more dollars or more government. We need to address problems with more community involvement, allowing people and encouraging people to care for one another. We need more transparency where government funds are spent. When you follow the dollars, a lot of times you follow the special interest. Number 3, we need more recognition of the good in the community instead of what's wrong. When a few people behave poorly, it should not be a reflection on the majority. When someone does something wrong, justice should be exercised quickly. All of the evidence should be considered. Justice should not be swayed by public opinion, and neither should government, but by the law of the land. Constitutional rights should be encouraged, especially the freedom of speech by the majority as well as the minority. Way too often, it's the minority voice that is heard and the majority is censored. Information should be regularly shared with the public, not just with special interest groups who manipulate numbers for to promote their ideals. Good people should be encouraged to speak up and be involved. I'm encouraged by those who have gone before me and are speaking up.
30 seconds, Mr. Zoller.
Smaller communities promote people helping and caring for one another. The primary government responsibilities are the protection of the people, thus military and police and roadways. Certainly development, and that is part of the community. But the people and the government need to co-labor, and when the government dictates through policies and of what makes decisions without the people's voice, we have problems.
Thank you, sir. Representative Hodgson and Rick Tanini, you're on deck.
Yes, my name is John Hodgson. I'm state representative for the area where this building is and points east, including Fisherville. I want to say I agree with the comments that have been made by folks in Eastwood, but I am going to speak specifically from a Fisherville perspective. That's 40023 because frequently doesn't get mentioned. In 1999, I bought some rough acreage in Fisherville, eastern Jefferson County, to build a home I plan to stay in for life. By 2003, as I was trying to get a permit to move into the house I just built, that land had been annexed by a Metro merger, and I became keenly aware from many interactions that the new Metro government had absolutely no idea what life outside the Watershed Expressway was like. 20 years have passed and not much has changed except my taxes, which have gone up dramatically with absolutely no increase in Metro services. Our roads in Fisherville are the last to get plowed, if ever. Plowing costs us in the neighborhood $300 to $500 a year each. We pay for our own garbage pickup, about $600 a year each. Police coverage is scarce, usually at least 20 minutes away if you have an emergency. Fire coverage is by a separate taxing district, and the same for EMS. Those taxes are $1,000 a year each or more. We have no wired high-speed internet access in many areas. Our north-south connector roads that have been mentioned here are barely 18 feet wide, so 2 trucks can't pass without one of them running a tire off the road, with no solution on the horizon, even in the 2050 road plan. Traffic is becoming unmanageable, and there is nothing on the 50-year planning horizon to improve it. And probably the most difficult item that has been noted here is metro planning and zoning gives us virtually zero protection from runaway development. Development is approved decades before the infrastructure will be built to support it, if ever. 2/3 of the county population lives outside the Waterson, but 100% of the mayor's senior staff lives inside the Waterson. So our needs are seldom even a consideration if they are understood at all. 80% of tax revenue comes from that outlying population, yet most of it gets spent inside the urban services district. Most of us, longer-term residents, moved out there to get away from the congestion of the city and wish the merger had never happened. Communities have a right to a measure of self-determination. People who have invested their life savings in a home have an interest in preserving their quiet lifestyle and their property values. It seems Metro's only interest in our area beyond taxes seems to be finding ways to legally force high-density apartments into areas where the residents do not want them. The city is determined to tax us like first-class citizens, but provides second-class service or no service. From my perspective, I think Metro merger has been a disaster for county residents, and I hope well-run suburban cities like Jeffersontown and Middletown, or even new small cities, can free us from what amounts to taxation without true representation. I love where I live, and I would really just like to escape from the Metro government. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hodgson. I would correct you on one thing. You said all the mayor's senior staff live inside the Waterson. That's true except for one. She lives in Shelby County. That's a true story. Just tell the truth. Rick, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to kind of change directions here. Most people have talked about this area and Fisherville Road and the park, and I'm going to talk about all of Jefferson County. I thought the reason to come here was to examine merger and see how it's either excelled or failed since merger. And I'd really like to talk about attitude. I got 2 examples and then I'll yield the mic. But a couple of years ago, of course, Louisville was, LMPD was in trouble with the numbers of employees. And so we get an email, St. Matthews gets an email 2 weeks before school starts, and Chief Conrad informs us that he is no longer going to supply school crossing guards. Now, you know, so they're abandoning the children going to school. And so we called and received a meeting before merger. Both Louisville Metro and Jefferson County had school crossing guards. They merged those 2 groups. And then they were in charge, LMPD was in charge of those people. Well, all of a sudden, because they had shortages, and I guess shortage of money, they decided to abandon the school crossing guards, and they said, well, those cities with police departments, you take it. But that's not what merger said. Merger said that those departments are being run by LMPD. So we had a big meeting, and Chief Conrad got up and he said, well, those areas aren't in our district. I raised my hand and asked him, I said, the last I heard, every property in Jefferson County was your district. And he said, well, that's what he said. So anyway, that's the attitude that is happening out there. Another one is, I'm sure you've heard before, EMS. I'm also chairman of the board of St. Matthews Board of Trustees. And we had incidents like a child got hurt on Trinity's football field. So the fire department rode out immediately and got there. The child needed to be transported to a hospital. Well, fire departments can't transport people without an ambulance. And at that time, we didn't have an ambulance, or neither did most of our other fire districts. The only two districts that had license to transport people for that reason to the hospital was Anchorage and in the city of Louisville, Metro Louisville. Well, it took an hour to get an ambulance to Trinity High School. Meanwhile, the stands are filled with people, and there's a kid laying on the ground, and we can't do a thing about it. And that's what prompted us to go to Frankfurt and get a CO. One of the reasons that we went to Frankfurt to get a CON, and it was resisted pretty heavily. And now every fire district, with the exception of Fairdale, has their own ambulances. So
30 seconds, Rick.
it's mostly what I want to say is it's an attitude where there's several mayors in this audience that could speak to it, but and I'm not looking at one person or one mayor, or it's just kind of an attitude from all. It's kind of like, well, that's not our district, but it is. This whole county's their district. Thank you.
Hold on, Rick.
What was the date of the incident you just described at Trinity?
I can't remember my own birthday, but no.
6 or 7?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But that's just one incident. Chief can tell you that before we started getting our own ambulances, you'd hear on the radio all the time, radio, can you get me an ETA on EMS?
Well,
Where's
I asked
EMS?
that question because we've received some data on the how the various EMS services work together. It will be posted on our website. So
Well, I
just think you should take a look at that.
I think Sean could probably give you better numbers than I could at this point. But our EMS director, he gives us statistics every trustee meeting, and we spend probably 60 or higher % of our our EMS runs outside our district. And we spend a lot of time in anywhere from Shawnee, downtown, even as far as Cane Run Road. And the people who are paying those ambulances and the cost of the employees is the citizens of St. Matthews Fire District. Sean could probably speak better to it than I, because he's got the same issue. So, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I would say that incident probably started in the fall of 2016, because Mayor, you probably got your CON, I think, in the year 2017. So I would guess probably fall of 2016 when that incident happened, since it was football. I'm sure it was fall.
And we now have 6 ambulances, and we have 4 firehouses. This is just St. Matthews. All of the fire districts have ambulances in their firehouses. But when we started at merger, Louisville Metro EMS had 25 ambulances on the street. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Now they have maybe 9. 11.
On a good day.
11. On a good day, they have 11. So what they've done, the attitude is, let them deal with it. And so, you know, it's just not a fair. It's just not fair. We have to do it. We want to do it if we're needed, but it's just not fair and it's not right.
Thank you, Rick. Tina Halbig, I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. My name is Nemus, and everybody gets it wrong, so please say it correctly. And then Stephanie Donovan.
Tina Halbig was perfect.
All right.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about Floyd's Fork as well. We do have a brochure of Floyd's Fork Environmental Association. I have enough for all of you. Want to say that when we were not under merged government, but we had a very, can you hear me okay? Did you say yes or no? Okay. Before we were under merged government, we had a very powerful judge executive, David L. Armstrong, and it was because of him that we were able to move to have some protections for Floyd's Fork Creek. He said, Floyd's Fork is a natural treasure. It is one of our last remaining natural streams, and we will never be able to recreate that ecology if we lose it now. He said that in 1991 when we formed Floyd's Fork Environmental Association to protect, preserve, and conserve Floyd's Fork Creek. Sometimes I've been called Miss Floyd's Fork in my younger days. Now I've been called the mother of Floyd's Fork, but I am the person who wrote to the Planning Commission asking for the overlay. And we did work a year and a half on that. We've spent many, many hours and many, many meetings, and more recently, the Floyd's Fork Vision Plan, a couple of years on the Land Development Code, many comp plans, and so on. But right now, I want to point out to you that in this historic document in 1981, former Judge Executive Mitch McConnell did the Floyd's Fork Watershed Plan. We had planned and had the money, $325,000 or $50,000, to do that back in about 2009. And it came to a halt because the person with the Kentucky Division of Water wanted to change the direction of the plan from a watershed plan to a water pollution trading plan, which we opposed. However, we still have the need for a watershed plan for Floyd's Fork. It's going to be more and more important with climate and the changes that we're seeing, more and more important to be able to capture as much water as we can to make it cleaner water and abundant water. It goes, from Floyd's Fork, and it goes through 5 counties, 6 with tributaries, and goes into the Salt River, onto the Ohio River, where many draw their drinking water. We have many contaminants that are in our water, and we do need funds to have cleaner drinking water. We do have these PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, known as forever chemicals, in our drinking water today. And we also need to be able to remove them from one other place, and that is wastewater. These regulations will be coming down from the EPA, and they are mandates, and it is a lot of money that we're looking at. There is money out there now, $10 billion in federal funds, and more recently,
30 seconds, and we have a question for you.
Okay. I did want to comment on the guidelines that are now, that we put in place with a 1.5-year task force back in 1991. 1991, well, we worked, and then they went through all the different processes in all the 14 small cities and the Planning Commission and the Fiscal Court, and were passed in 1993. But they are guidelines, and so now we're looking for some standards, regulations. However, we don't want to lose the good things that we have, and giving one person the authority to make many decisions is not right. And we would like to see that change. But I hope that you will pay attention to Floyd's Fork. It means a lot to a lot of people. Just a comment on merger, I don't see that our area has benefited. We don't have the broadband yet. We don't have, the roadways, the things. We're not asking for all of that, but just to let you know that we don't have that. And so, even though you say that we're a merged government and we're all one city, and we understand that's to get more federal dollars and more money to help Louisville, we really haven't seen how it has benefited us.
Yeah, Ms. Halbig, I just had one question. You mentioned one person. Who were you referring to?
One person about what? You mean with Floyd's Fork?
Yes.
I said I was the one person.
No, you said there was only one person making decisions.
Oh, yes. In the guidelines that we're looking over now that have to be commented on by the end of this month, the director or his or her designee will make many of the decisions.
Director of?
Planning and Design Services.
Thank you.
Stephanie Donovan, and then Ralph Langhorn. Langham, you're on deck.
My name's Stephanie Donovan. I'm a resident outside of the Gene Snyder, so Middletown. We do not get a vote as far as anything that is approved by Middletown. My confusion over planning and zoning and living where we do is, does Jefferson County and Louisville Metro do that, or does Middletown do that? Because the problem is incurred within Middletown city limits that are making the traffic and some of the wastewater issues worse. So I lived here my whole life. I lived in New Albany and I grew up there. I moved here in 1985, and we built our first house in Middletown. And of course, that was pre-merger. We built our second house outside the Gene Snyder in 1990. And the changes are astronomical, but the services increase has not been. I will say that I remember during the merger, I believe that one of the main reasons it passed was because a very popular mayor had already reached his term limits, and they wanted him back. And so Mayor Abramson came back on after he'd already fulfilled his duties as a Louisville mayor. Then he became Metro government mayor. And he's a wonderful person. That's it. But I believe that that's why the merger passed, was because people wanted him back so much. I don't think that people that live out in the county realized that some of the promises that were made were not going to be fulfilled. I didn't think that we would lose our voice in the community. I feel like it's all about the city of Louisville, what used to be the city of Louisville, and the metro area has been put by the wayside. I don't know, I was reading your paragraph that said the reason why we're here tonight about the tax powers distribution of government services. I don't think we're getting our fair share based upon our tax dollars of governmental services, and the future relations between government entities. Right now, the zoning process, you've got air pollution control, you've got transportation. You're supposed to have planning and design, but I don't know where that ever comes into a factor when you allow a humongous apartment complex to be built in a Target parking lot. I mean, it makes no sense to add more cars, more traffic, more people to an area without giving us wider roads and things to go with it. I don't think that one hand of the metro government knows what the other hand is doing most of the time. And I think that some of the people that are approving things rubber stamp it because say, oh, well, transportation already did a traffic study, it's fine. And then they don't go through and do their due diligence as far as pollution control or, you know, and we traveled all over the country for a couple years when my husband retired, and there are beautiful cities in suburbs of major large areas. And Louisville has become ugly. I mean, we don't even get mowing out here. So, I mean, most places have nice wide roads that have shoulders so that traffic isn't stopped if a car breaks down. They can pull over somewhere. We don't have that. Most of our roads, we don't have pretty easements. We don't have medians that are taken care of. I mean,
Ms.
we
Donald,
really live in an ugly area.
Ms. Donald, I'll give you 10 seconds to wrap up. If you want
Okay.
to.
Anyway, so I really did mainly come to talk about zoning, but I don't know if your purpose of your commission is to maybe vote to undo the merger or just correct the problems that have occurred.
Try to correct the problems.
All right, thank you.
I think there's some hallelujahs in the audience. Ralph, you're up, partner. And Paul Deans. Paul, you're next. What's it? Dinas. Paul Dinas is next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for showing up today to face my wrath. And as a matter of introduction, I happen to be an Eisenhower Republican. When I turned 21 and became eligible to vote, I was serving in the U.S. Air Force. I registered as a Republican so I could vote for Ike. Those are the best votes of my life. And I have probably been voting longer than most of the people in this audience have been on this earth. So it seems to me that this House Bill 314 was primarily a Republican bill, and it was vetoed, and the veto was overridden by one political party. Apparently, that political party was unwilling to make any compromises to get votes from another party or to have people in your party not vote because it wasn't conservative enough. In my world, such legislation is not legislation, it is simply political male bovine excrement. Several people have mentioned traffic, and I think that the people in Frankfurt could do a lot more good working on the problems that we have on traffic. The intersection by the fire station has been mentioned. In 2018, that was 5 years ago, that intersection was declared with an F rating. F rating, 5 years ago, and it's still an F rating. You could do a hell of a lot more good if you took care of that kind of a problem instead of limiting the time a mayor can serve. Do you limit have termination for senators and representatives? The other thing about this intersection that is so terrible, Kentucky, the University of Kentucky, has the Community Transportation Innovation Academy, which is operated primarily by Dr. Nikiforos Stamatiadis and Adam Kirk. Back in about 2005, they did a lot of research. They do all the research for transportation in Kentucky, even down to the ideal size of gravel to put in the base for a highway.
30 seconds, Mr. Langen.
One thing that should be considered for that intersection would be a roundabout, and according to the Dr. Stamatiadis and his group, that would reduce the overall crash reduction of 37% and a 51% reduction in injury and fatality crashes. Does that sound like something we should be doing? That wasn't even considered as far as I can tell. and it reduces the number of conflict points compared to a four-way intersection from 32 conflict points down to 16.
Mr. Langen, I'm not brave enough to cut you off, but your time is out. You go as long as you want, brother, because I'm not doing it.
You're bigger than I am. Sit down and chuckle.
My mama didn't raise no fool. I'm not cutting you off. Thank you, sir. Paul, you're up, and Tracy, it looks like Anton. You're going to pass, okay. I can't read my own writing. I darn sure can't read yours. Well, then Tim Cook, you're going to be slid forward. You're up, Paul.
Okay. First of all, does this work? Yes. All right. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service on this board. It is very rare not only to find citizens involved, but to have multiple levels of government together to review a functioning or dysfunctioning part of government that deals with these folks. So thank you. My name is Paul Dinas. I'm a former resident of Middletown and a current resident of Eastwood, where I moved 26 years ago so that I could commute to Lexington. Yes, where I worked at the Kentucky League of Cities because I believe very much in the mission of cities and government for the well-being of us all. The origins of Louisville Metro were to take two modestly, and I use the term generously, modestly successful units of government, one far less so than other, to make a better coordinated method of providing services, planning, and growth within a major metropolitan area. It hasn't done very well. What we did get out of the pre-merger was Floyd's Fork, but we are in the process of losing it, and we're losing it very rapidly. During my time at the League of Cities, I was able to identify some successful characteristics of cities. One is vision, one is autonomy to act, one is giving citizens a good return on their money, and the other is listening to citizens' voice. Very, very important. Let me again say services and making people feel that they get a fair share back. One other point that they often have is vision. I can give you some examples of successful cities: Douglas Hills, Hurstburn, Middletown, Jeffersontown, Anchorage, Audubon Park, Northfield, Rolling Hills, St. Matthews. I could go on. You notice I haven't said Louisville Metro government. I will say Lexington, Urban County, Fayette government because I was able to watch it from the user standpoint and as a member of the organization that I once represented. I do have to say at this point, please do not construe any comment that I make as having origin or attributed to the league. I'm very grateful for my time there, but they didn't write this. When I identify those characteristics, I will say that Louisville Metro, frankly, has none of these attributes. We have, for citizens outside of the Snyder and to a great extent outside of the Watterson Poor Services, we have double taxing where we're paying for services for Louisville Metro, which we're not getting, and we're paying our great fire service for EMS. So there's a question there. Road services, pretty pathetic. We were able to get some crack filling. We still have potholes. We have no police. I have not seen a police officer in the East End unless he lives there, or he's commuting out to his home in Shelbyville and he parks the car in the parking lot. There's something to be heard from that in itself. There's no transportation design services, and there is a lack of coordination and presenting with muscle the interest of urban county government to District 5. District 5 is somewhere back there in the rearview mirror in their vision and understanding of ways to improve traffic. And I will give reference to my neighbor, Ralph Langdon, that yes, I have seen successful traffic circles in places like Fort Collins, Colorado, really? Hilton Head, South Carolina, Cheyenne, Wyoming, not the spot of progressive life.
30 seconds, Paul.
Okay. Development fees, we don't get the money back. Sad but true. But what the real issue is the empowerment or the legislation which allows us to create a new city It must be rewritten. It is not democratic. It requires a 60% vote of residents. What happened to majority vote? It's not there, 60%, and it's never defined what the citizens are. We don't know if it's lots or moms and dads or moms, dads, and dogs or whatever. So services are not good, and we need to improve it, and we need to have representation. And those are my key points. Representation, improve the services, and please, please, no longer have a planning commission which makes decisions to meet the interest of Canadian home builders on Johnson Road. And I mean that.
Thank you, Paul. We have 4 more speakers, and then we'll open it up until the time runs out. Tim Cook, you're up. Mayor Chapman, you're on deck.
Thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for being here and those in attendance. I wasn't going to speak, but as I said here, kind of got a little worked up. I am a longtime resident of Fisherville. My parents moved to Fisherville in 1958. I grew up in Fisherville along Floyd's Fork. It was a blessed childhood. It's a wonderful place. I don't think my family lived within 10 miles of Fisherville, and you know, I'm 70 years old, so for 65 years I've been right in Fisherville, and I've seen it. I've seen baptisms in Floyd's Fork. I've canoed Floyd's Fork. Floyd's Fork is the centerpiece of Fisherville, and I agree with Representative Hodgkins that we don't get any representation there. My father apparently was a visionary back before the merger. He said, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I think the big selling point at that time was population. They were trying to gather as much population at that time so that we could be, I believe, like the 15th largest city. I might be wrong on that number. It was going to help the airport. It was going to do all of these things for Jefferson County. Well, I think it probably did for Louisville, but anybody outside Waterson Expressway, especially Gene Snyder, well, the only benefit we got was to give tax money. That was our big benefit. And I know in Derbyshire, we have, I believe, a $12,000 budget to remove snow. We can remove snow inside Derbyshire, but we can't go anywhere when we get out on Eastwood Fisherville Road. So I don't know, I really appreciate those that have got up and spoke before me because there's some really smart people. I really like this gentleman right here. My father was an Eisenhower Republican as well, a World War II Navy vet, and that's who I am. So I don't know. I would just like to see some sort of representation. If you're going to get our tax money, then give us some services. That's all I want. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, you're up. And then that was Tim Cook, right, Mr. Cook? Yep. All right, and then Jerry McGraw, you're next. And Mr. Woodall, you're in the hole.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming to Middletown and to listening to us and hoping to respond to our requests and needs. You know, I was elected mayor in Middletown in 2001. That was the first year of merger with Jerry Abramson. So I've seen 20 years of what's happened for a merger. I'm not all that impressed with what happened. The services that the city used to receive back in 2001, back early merger, was a lot greater than it is now. The city of Middletown was much smaller, no doubt. It's grown considerably. But I think the tax base that's created has not reflected the services from Metro. For instance, Middletown started its police department because of need. We wasn't getting the protection we needed from LMPD. They were stretched to their limits. The Middletown Fire Department started an ambulance service because here again they wasn't getting the service for the ambulances. The Public Works, I know Middletown's Public Works does work on metro roads that we really shouldn't, but the response time for metros, not what we expect in Middletown. And the maintenance, the road improvements. A lot of the improvements in the city with roads, expansion of the roads or sidewalks or whatever it may be, it requires a sponsor in order to do that funding. I really don't know, and I may be corrected on this, but I don't know that Metro has sponsored a project. I think Middletown sponsored projects, Kentucky Transportation sponsored projects, quite frankly, because that requires 20% of the cost to come out of our pockets, not Metro. So that, that's a concern. MSD seems to get a little tougher and tougher to get services and services through our group. But quite frankly, the government center in Middletown moved. What better implication that the services aren't out here is they shut down. And because of that, of course, most of you heard, Middletown had to ante up quite a bit of money to create a library back out in our community. And all of these functions I've seen over 20 years of being mayor. So please, if you want to sit down and go over details, I'll be glad to do it because I've had maybe 20 years too long, but I have done that. But I really think that the problem is the East End's grown, East End and Middletown, I'll say. For instance, Shelbyville Road up here at, or Thornton's, I call it, it's about 50,000 cars per day go down that road. The majority of those go east, west, don't stop in the city. But the growth in our community has outgrown the support from Metro government. So I encourage more support from Metro government for the dollars that we're spending down to the Metro, bring some more back out to us. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, if you've got a couple more minutes.
Sure.
Can I ask you, I don't know whether you've got these data handy, but if you do, I'd appreciate your tell me what they are. What is the average tax burden on a resident of Middletown, if you can express that in terms of average household costs, whether that's involving, let's say, property, any other kind of police protection, anything for fire services, whatever it might be, what would you say that cost is?
I don't know that I really know what you're asking for and how to turn
I'm asking
that.
you, what is the additional cost to be a resident of Middletown?
Okay, the ambulance service, I have to talk to the fire department on what it costs to put the ambulances out here. I think ambulance is what, $300,000 a piece to purchase that's out in here. And we do not see Metro ambulances out in this area.
Understood.
Our police department budget's about $1.6 million for the city of Middletown. So that's a direct cost that we shouldn't have to be paying, but we are because of lack of protection with LMPD.
Yeah.
And Byron, I think the question is,
Yes.
if I live on this side of the street and it's Middletown, and I live on that side of the street and it's not Middletown, what's the difference? You talked about fire protection. That's a little different because that's not the city of Middletown.
Sure, right.
But so your insurance premium tax is the same.
It is. We get 5%. Metro gets 5%.
So
right.
Whether you live in Middletown or not, you're
Right.
taxed that.
Right.
What's the additional tax? How do you pay for Middletown police?
We just stretch our dollars a little bit more than Metro does. The Middletown.
Where do your dollars come from that you're stretching is the question.
Where does it come from?
Yeah.
Well, Middletown is, quite frankly, because of this lack of services with Metro, Middletown is looking to pass an occupational tax to try to help do what we shouldn't have to do, but we've got to do because of lack of service.
But you don't have it now.
No, we don't, but we're in the process of looking at that.
Here's the reason why I'm asking the question, because I think that we've heard some sentiments stated by some of the attendees here that the answer might be to form a different city. My question is, and I think this is really important to understand,
Sure.
What are the additional costs that would go to the resident who would form that city?
Well,
I'm not suggesting
well,
it's
the
good or
addition-
bad. My only question is, I think in the interest of full understanding of what the impact might be, what is the additional cost that comes from forming a city? Because I think people have to decide if that is what they want to do or whether there are other ways of forcing, if that's the right term,
Sure.
metro government to provide the services needed.
Well, of course, Middletown has a 0.135% tax on PVA. That's the additional taxes on top of the metro or the regular PVA taxes. That's the funds we'll work off, and the 5% insurance premium tax. If you wanted to form a new city, you would have to have a PVA tax. Ours is 0.135. And of course, the insurance premium tax would divert, I would think, would divert back to that city. So that would be the two taxing means that the new formed city would have.
Okay. Do you have an additional real estate tax, property tax?
That's the 0.135. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So I want to make sure I understand that's an important question. So in Middletown, you get a 0.135 extra property tax.
Right.
And that's it.
That's
The 5% insurance premium you're paying whether you live in Middletown or not. It goes down to City Hall if you're not in a city, local city.
That's
if
right.
you're in a smaller city, you just keep it local.
Right.
What you also get is you get road funds that would otherwise go downtown.
True.
That you get that doesn't charge Middletown anymore. And when we're talking about fire and EMS, that's not the city either.
No.
Because Eastwood,
right,
which is not a city, they pay the same amount of money as someone who lives in Middletown pays, because that's a fire protection district.
But I think the Middletown Eastwood, it's combined departments. I think they've actually raised their tax 8 cents per 100 to create an ambulance service that shouldn't be.
No, it's not 8 cents. It was 4, and I think it's 6 now.
Is it
so
6?
It's
Okay.
6 cents for every $100 of value. That's what provides our EMS.
That's the ambulance service.
That's what provides our EMS, and incidentally, 40% of our runs go outside of it, so we're also double subsidizing. Bonnie?
Another thing about cities, just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, so in Douglas Hills, we at one time were at 0.137 on $100. Because of our last budget and all of the costs, we've gone to 0.147. We also get 5% of insurance premium taxes. As Representative Neiman says, we also get road funding. But here's the thing that I want folks to know as well. When this government center was taken away from this particular area, it wasn't just the library. And I want to thank the city of Middletown and Mayor Byron Chapman and those folks for putting in their own money and putting back a library that was the most visited library in Jefferson County at the time. It also took away Neighborhood Place. That's where the folks out here came to be able to get housing services and other types of things. So on my taxes at my home, I pay my property taxes to Louisville, Metro. I pay with the fire district, I pay the school. But over and above, I pay about maybe $300 or $400 extra to the city of Douglas Hills. And with that, I get garbage at about $14.60 per household. I get snow removal anytime it's 2 inches. We get lights, sidewalks. We maintain 2 parks and a pool. We don't have a police department, but we do hire out off-duty services. So those are some of the things that I know that we have mayors in the audience are sitting there thinking as well, that the things that they provide for the folks in their city, they probably would not receive or would not receive anywhere close of what they get if they weren't a city.
I appreciate you talking about the library. The city of Middletown, we figure that that's about $150,000 per year that the city's providing for that. City of Middletown providing for that library.
Pay that for the library.
Well, that's we own the property, and we but the value in that property for real estate rented aspect about $150 a year.
I want to get some clarification. We all talk about rates. And we talk about services and so forth. We've got to look at the dollars and the real dollars of what comes in from a revenue point of view, and then what goes out in terms of providing services. Because our rates go from I think Worcester City is probably 6.5, and you have urban services over 35. That's just on one category of real property. So you got to take things in the cumulative, and that's what the chairman says. So what is your total tax burden on that? So we need to sit there and weigh those issues out and understand that. Because we go through our analysis and so forth, we've got to take all those things into consideration. And I'll make sure people are clear in terms of our definitions and what we're trying to achieve could be very confusing and very slanted one way or the other. No matter where you are on the issue, it could be skewed one way or the other. So when we discuss things, we want to make sure we got a clear understanding of definition in terms of how things are defined, and then we can go from there. So I have a question for you, Mayor, and that is, what is your percentage in terms of breakout, your total revenues? You got real property, you got insurance license, you don't have occupational tax.
No.
So what is your what's your top three tax revenue categories that you realize?
Okay, it would be the PVA for the property, insurance premium tax.
Which you pay anyway.
Right.
Percentage, please. I know the categories. I want to know the percentages.
0.135 on a.
No, that's a rate. I understand. I'm not trying to debate you. I just want to know the dollar. So in other words, if you have $100, then $80 comes from real estate. Then $10 comes from insurance, and then $10 comes from that. That's what I'm trying to get an understanding. You know what that is? If not, that's okay. I can find out. We can talk later.
Well, I'll be glad to sit down and talk with you all in very detail on anything. I've got my budget. It's open record. I'd be glad to show it to you. I think that's the problem I'm running into. Having gone through 20 years as the mayor, I've seen the services drastically decline because of the additional services we've had to provide due to the growth of the community. But and the growth of the community is good and bad, but a lot of the growth as far as the occupational taxes going downtown kind of is not coming way back out here to where it needs to be. But I'd be glad to meet with this committee at any time to go over any details you have. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jerry, you're up. And Jim Woodall, you're next. Jim, if you come on down.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I believe you've heard a number of comments that I've commented about before. Question about incorporating the city. I would suggest that if we were getting services from Metro government that we are entitled to based upon the tax dollars that we're spending, we wouldn't need to be looking at the possibility of incorporating more cities. But we're not getting those services. Now, last week, at the July meeting of this commission, there were some comments made about what is the tax rate, tax basis in this city related to other areas. And last Friday night, or Wednesday night, I believe it was, some other comments came up about how low our tax rates are. And at that point, I knew there was something wrong, and I did some immediate research, and I was able to provide Co-Chairman Nemes with a thing that I found on my phone that says we are one of the highest taxed cities in the country. Mr. Nemes, I would like to provide to you at this point several copies of documents that further show, and I would ask that you provide these to all of the members of the commission and also have them as exhibits on your webpage, but show in each one of these, whether it's from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, whether it is whatever agency it is, CNN News, many agencies, they will rate us Louisville between the 4th and 11th highest taxed city in the nation. That's not in this region, but in the entire nation. Would like to provide you
Jerry, let me make a suggestion to make sure I can get it in the record. We're telling everybody, all the citizens, they can submit something in writing. And so put a cover letter on that, and then we'll make it official. Is that fair?
That's fine. That's
Okay.
fine. I just wanted to make sure, get it to you.
You can hand it to us now, but I don't know that that'll be official unless you.
I'll send you a letter and send it to you that way.
You can proceed.
Now, I wanted to speak tonight, as most of you are aware, well, some of you haven't been at prior public input meetings, but most of you have been, and you're aware that I tend to speak every night. And part of it is we've only given 3 minutes at a time to speak, and there's so many things, issues, that I've been coming every night and talking about something. So tonight, I want to talk about taxes. And that was the first thing that I just talked about with those particular issues. One of the things I would like to see this commission do is start out with looking at what are the services that should be provided. Now, you've already addressed the issue of ambulances. You're aware of some of the issues with that. You know, the commission knows there is an ordinance that Metro government is responsible for ambulance service for the entire county. And from the comments made tonight and otherwise, you know they're not doing it. But I would like to see the commission begin by defining what are the services that should be provided to every resident in Jefferson County. We are paying property taxes and other taxes in that highest tax rate in the nation throughout the county. We should know what services we are entitled to, ambulance being one of them, police department being one of them. Fire department's not in that group. Garbage collection is not in that group. But what are the services that we are entitled to throughout this county? Then let's look at what are the services that are provided to the Urban Services District. Fire department, garbage collection, street lights are the three that I'm aware of. How much are those three services costing the Urban Services District or Metro government in essence? What is the total cost on that? Then, how much money is actually being collected? I own property throughout this county. Some of it is in the Urban Services District, some of it is not.
30 seconds, Jerry.
But in that amount that is being collected in the Urban Services District, what's the total? Is the amount that is being charged for those expenses greater or less than the money that's coming in? That means there either needs to be a tax increase or a reduction in services. The first year of merger, one of the council members told me Metro government, our county taxes, paid $16 million into the Urban Services District to cover those expenses. Until we get things down to that basic level, I don't think we're going to be able to make much determination. This commission needs to continue also because you're not getting everything done that we needed to get done to have this resolution.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. I could go on for another half hour with no problems.
Jim, and I'm sure you will on my phone tomorrow. Good, my good friend. Jim Woodall, I think you're last one we have signed up. If you're still here, Mr. Woodall. If not, then if anybody hasn't signed up, we have a little bit more time. We've done it in other places. If you want to speak, you can. The only provision is you must say your name. Linda, come on up. I want to answer a question that Jerry mentioned, and he said, do we know how much it costs for the light? So Urban Services District has 3 services that they get that they're taxed differently for. We're not taxed for this. That is their fire protection, their lights, and their garbage. And so Jerry says until we know the numbers of what's coming in, what's going out, we can't do anything. We do know that we are subsidizing them more than $15 million a year. So they're not covering that cost. So that's in the mix of what we're talking about. And we have those numbers. So we have a lot of numbers of what's coming in, where it's coming in from, where it's going. So I think, Jerry, we have a lot of those numbers already compiled. And you talked about how much is USD being subsidized. We know it's over $15 million. Linda. And you have to say your name for the record.
It's obvious I wasn't planning on speaking, but just listen to what everybody has to say. Oh, I'm Linda Herrick, and I am a citizen that lives outside of the Waterston. And from what I'm hearing, okay, we had a merger that happened, and merger on paper was one thing. But what sounds like is that we still have 2 separate areas. We have what's inside the Waterston, and we have what's outside the Waterston. And it's not equal. It's not the same. We pay a lot of taxes. We're not getting what some other people are getting within the Waterston. So it's like either we need to even this out and we get the same kind of services that others are getting for the taxes we pay, or maybe is the solution to demerge, because it's not working for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herrick. Anyone else?
We were talking a lot about the zoning. Does metro zoning trump the cities, or are we talking about the unincorporated areas that there's development that's not being?
You want to speak that, Mayor? Go to the mic.
It depends if your city has zoning authority. St. Matthews, Middletown, several of the larger cities, Jeffersontown, have zoning authority. Those community cities that are lower than 4th class, back when they changed all that, that authority goes to metro government. So if you've got, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You answered my question, because in the rest of the state, it's it's the same way, and I was wondering if in the metro it trumped it. So you answered my question. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I want to note real quick while you're walking up there, Councilman Stuart Benson he's been here for almost the whole meeting. I should have called him when he came in. He's here. He represents, I think, a great deal of Eastwood, and so talk with him. The first time I ever heard of the problems of Eastwood was from him because he's pushing so hard. So he's been fighting for it. And the last person, or one more person, is our fire and EMS chief, Chief Groot is here. Grudy is here. He's here with two of his guys. He's wonderful. I also want to thank you publicly. My next door neighbor had a massive heart attack less than 10 days ago. He's dead other than your guys coming and saving him. And so thank you for that. I know a number of people who your people saved, a lady named Nellie Kate Normbrock, who's 4 years old. Your guys saved her on Academy, at Academy Sports. She's dead if we have to wait for Louisville EMS. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do for our people.
Okay, Paul Dinas again, and the comment is about planning and zoning. We have a decidedly unrepresentative planning and zoning board, which at the time was decided to represent various interests. Unfortunately, citizens make up the largest group, yet they have control of 3 seats. And those are political appointments. So 3 out of, 12, I think, 9 or 12. It's planning and zoning, the planning commission. Very unrepresentative and decidedly representing a broad variety of interests, but not necessarily the citizens. Just look at the hodgepodge and you'll see how uncoordinated and poor vision there is. Thank you. No representation.
Okay, are there any other speakers?
Dan Taffel, Mayor of Rolling Fields. Just one question for you all. Is the city of Louisville the only partisan race that occurs in the state of Kentucky? Shively and Louisville. Was there ever any, I was probably too young at the time, or actually I lived overseas. Was there ever a possibility of making it nonpartisan? And I think that would be, I think a lot of people, there's a big movement to no labels, and it really helps break down the walls. And I'm not sure there's ever any interest in doing that from the state legislature, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
The day before COVID hit the state capitol, I, along with former Mayor Bill Deriff, went and testified, at least trying to start to make the mayor's position nonpartisan and work from there rather than the whole of the council. It passed out of committee and then COVID hit, and the only thing these folks had a chance to take up then was our pandemic. But at one time, we got as far as passing out of first committee.
So, well, this is House Bill 314, and when we first filed it, 314 said that Louisville wouldn't be partisan. It was in the middle, not the middle, but it was the beginning of a mayor's race, and I thought that would be dishonorable to make that change. I fully support making it not partisan. Shively's partisan, Louisville's partisan, none of the rest are. Lexington is not partisan. A number of big cities throughout the country are not partisan. A number of them are partisan. So it's a question that we need to resolve. But I pulled that out of the bill because I didn't think it would be honorable to change the rules in the middle of the game. But that is, that's part of the things that we're going to be moving forward. I fully and strongly, as much as I can, with a lot of the weight that I got, support getting rid of nonpartisan. And the bottom line for me is, because if you got to hunt a vote in Eastwood, you give a damn about Eastwood's roads. If you don't have to hunt a vote out there, I will put it somewhere where they vote for me.
Okay, if there are no other speakers, I think we're going to close the meeting. I would just like to offer a couple of comments. I think we've really appreciate the participation, the level of participation, and the thoughtfulness of the comments. The one thing that struck me as I've listened to the comments here and in some of the other locations that we've been at, and that is, of course, things are not, that we're now 20 years into merger. Merger itself was, I suppose somebody would say it was I don't know, somebody's idea, I suppose, of what could be accomplished at that time. It wasn't perfect. I don't think it was intended to be perfect. I don't even think the citizens intended it to be perfect. In fact, if my understanding, and I was not here at the time, I've been here for actually I was here at the time. But the things that seem to have led to the merger itself and the divisions that were in the community well before merger, and the divisions that continue today, the question is, where do we go from here, as I see it? You all may have a different view of this, obviously. As I said, merger was not perfect. It was not intended to be perfect. The costs between the urban services district and the rest of the county were not intended to be the same. The services were not intended to be the same, all of them. And so one of the things that we've been looking at as a commission is what were the original agreements that were part of merger, and what have we assumed to be part of that agreement? Many of the things that people are asking for now and saying have not been fairly distributed were not intended to be fairly distributed. The question is, that being the case, where do we go from here, and how do we change that? And the issue that I think the residents have to decide is whether or not the benefits that could come from a united community made better can be accomplished by a divided community acting in more particularly and smaller interests. That, I think, is the critical issue. It's not that one is better or worse. It's really up to you all. And I simply know that as we go forward here, one thing that the commission has got to do is to make certain that citizens understand that issue, as well as the whole question about services, taxes, et cetera, where it's clear that the burden is unequal. And the question is, how do you move towards a more equal distribution? That's the critical issue that we face as a community. Those are my comments. I'm going to take the liberty, since I opened this meeting, to close it at this point. Thank you all very much, unless you want to come to Atherton tomorrow.